The latest whisper around the league does not scream blockbuster, it murmurs something far more uncomfortable. According to Brian Windhorst, the Celtics are actively scanning the market for a center. Simple sentence, heavy consequences. Because hidden inside that search is a question nobody in Boston wants to ask out loud. What happens if the front office believes the answer is already in the building? Ivica Zubac sounds tempting on the surface. A familiar name, a safe archetype, a player executives trust because he looks like certainty. But here is the part nobody is emphasizing enough. Zubac is not available. Not now, not cheaply, and possibly not ever. The Clippers see him as a structural piece, not a bargaining chip. That matters because it reframes the entire conversation. This is not about chasing Zubac. This is about why Boston is comfortable letting that rumor breathe. And then there is Neemias Queta. Quietly, almost invisibly, Queta is forcing uncomfortable debates in front offices and scouting room. When he is on the floor, shots at the rim become decisions instead of instinct. Drivers hesitate. Guards float passes instead of attacking. That hesitation does not show up in highlight reels, but it bleeds into winning possession. Opponents shoot dramatically worse near the basket when Queta is anchoring the paint, and that is not noise. That is influence. But here is where the tension lives. Influence is not the same as trust. Trust is built over time, and Queta has not been given time by NBA standard. Fewer than 2,000 career minutes is not a rare. The Celtics did not simply survive the absence of Jayson Tatum. They adapted faster than anyone expected. And that is where the real tension begins. Because hot streaks are supposed to cool. Role players are supposed to regress. Early season mirages are supposed to expose themselves by December. But Boston kept winning, and not in ways that rely on luck. They won by solving problems on the fly, by reshaping responsibility, by turning uncertainty into leverage. Jaylen Brown did not just raise his scoring, he absorbed gravity. Defenses bent toward him earlier in possessions, which unlocked second and third options before help could recover. Derek White did not just rediscover his jumper, he weaponized timing, attacking moments when defenses assumed he would defer. Peyton Pritchard did not just score more, he forced opponents to guard the entire floor for 48 minutes. Trade deadline logic usually follows desperation or ambition. Boston sits in between. That is the most dangerous place to be. Because the Celtics do not need a savior, they need precision. A single adjustment, one piece that absorbs pressure instead of creating it. The conversation naturally drifts to the front court, not because Boston lacks talent there, but because playoff basketball exposes inefficiencies more brutally than regular season run. Defensive rebounding is not about effort, it is about geometry, about angles, about having one body that ends possessions before chaos begins. That is why names like Ivica Zubac surface in quiet executive conversation, not as fantasy trades, but as archetypes. The question is not whether the Clippers would move him. The question is what Boston signals by monitoring that profile at all. It signals belief. Belief that this version of the Celtics can matter in April. Belief that a modest addition could swing a series. Belief that this run is revealing a higher baseline than anyone projected. The Stepien rule is not dramatic. It does not trend on social media, but it can kill deals before they ever reach a serious stage. And in this case, it forces Boston into a high-wire act that only a handful of front offices are equipped to walk. Here is the tension that matters. The Celtics cannot simply stack future picks the way desperate teams do. Their draft capital is spaced out, fragmented by design. If Boston puts a first-round pick from 2026 on the table, the next one cannot come until 2031. That gap is not just a number, it is a psychological barrier for the other side. Front offices prefer continuity in assets. They want optionality year after year, not patience stretched across half a decade. This is where the curiosity gap opens. If Zubac makes so much sense, why has this conversation not exploded already? Because Boston is not negotiating from desperation. They are negotiating from leverage that does not look like leverage on paper. And Fernie Simon sits at the center of that leverage, a player whose value is not about box scores right now, but about timing, age, and contract flexibility. The Clippers have tracked him before. That matters more than most reports admit. Interest does not vanish just because circumstances change. It waits. If Los Angeles ever decides that recalibration beats stubborn continuity, Simon's plus draft capital becomes a serious conversation, not because it overwhelmed, because it aligned financially, strategically, temporally. The Celtics understand something subtle here. They do not need to win the bidding war. They need to frame the cleanest exit ramp for the Clippers if things stall, and that ramp has to make sense years from now, not just next season. Now, zoom out to Boston's internal calculus. Zubac is not being discussed as a savior. He is being discussed as a multiplier, a player who makes lineups more stable, matchups less volatile, playoff posed. As the deadline creeps closer, one quiet rumor refuses to disappear. It does not arrive with fireworks or bold headline. It sits in the background, waiting. The Celtics and the Nets have talked before about Anthony Simon. Those conversations did not lead anywhere. That part everyone knows. What matters now is why the door never fully closed. Both franchises are moving in opposite directions, and that is exactly why this conversation keeps resurfacing. Boston is navigating a rare moment, competitive enough to matter, flexible enough to maneuver. Every decision is being filtered through one priority: extending a championship window without locking the organization into financial paralysis. Brooklyn, meanwhile, is doing something just as deliberate, turning cap space into future leverage, absorbing contracts others want to move, accumulating optionality instead of win. Here is the part that rarely gets discussed publicly. Resetting the repeater tax is not about saving ownership money. It is about restoring flexibility when it matters most. Teams trapped in repeater status lose creativity. Every marginal upgrade becomes prohibitively expensive. Boston understands this better than almost anyone. Escaping that cycle now opens doors later. Doors that contenders need when one final piece becomes available. The Nets are uniquely positioned to help with. Brooklyn is sitting on cap space that most teams can only dream of. They also have a cluster of mid-sized contracts that can be rearranged like puzzle pieces. This is not about blockbuster names, it is about structure. 2 contracts going out, 1 coming in, picks sliding quietly across the table. No rush, no desperation. And then there is the basketball leg, which makes this more than a financial exercise. Boston's interest in Day'Ron Sharpe never vanished. It paused. Circumstances changed. The price was wrong in the summer. The context is different now. Sharpe represents something Boston values deeply: durability, physical presence, and the ability to survive playoff minutes without being schemed off the floor. Not glamorous, extremely useful. Nick Richards did not play in one of the Suns' most revealing wins of the season. Not because of injury, not because of matchup trouble, because the postseason rotation was already taking shape, and Richards was not part of it. That single decision matters more than any quote. It signals direction. It signals priority, and most importantly, it signals availability. While Phoenix tightens its rotation, Boston is quietly exposing its own pressure point. The Celtics are winning games while asking one true center to absorb the physical burden. Neemias Queta has responded brilliantly, efficient, physical, disciplined. His recent stretch has not been loud, but it has been authoritative. Double-digit rebound, shot deterrence, finishing plays instead of chasing them. The kind of production that stabilizes lineup. But here is the question nobody is asking out loud. What happens when that margin disappears for a week, or a series, or a single quarter that swings a season? Boston has depth, but not redundancy at the position that absorbs the most punishment. Luka Garza brings spacing. He does not bring resistance. Sam Hauser and Josh Minott help in modern lineups, but they are forwards operating up a position. That works in stretches. It does not always survive playoff targeting, because teams like Phoenix are not forced to rush. They are evaluating timing, and Boston is one of the few contenders who can act without compromising their future. Richards is affordable now. His contract is manageable. His role is defined. There is no risk of ego conflict, no need for adjustment periods that derail momentum. From Boston's perspective, this is not about replacing Queta. It is about protecting him, about ensuring that 48 minutes do not collapse into 28 sustainable ones, about having a Seki. Around the league, December 15th is treated like a switch. Trade season begins. Phones light up. Roles suddenly feel temporary. For the Celtics, this date carries weight, but not in the way most people assume. Yes, players become trade eligible. Yes, front offices reassess. But sometimes the harshest reality is also the clearest lens. Luka Garza's minutes have dried up. That part is obvious. What is not obvious is why that matters less than it seems. On the surface, the numbers tell a cold story. Fewer appearances, shorter stints, games where his name never leaves the bench. In a league obsessed with rotation charts, that looks like a verdict. But the Celtics are not evaluating Garza the way fans do, through nightly box scores or minute totals. They are evaluating him through scarcity and function. Garza's role has not shrunk because he failed. It has shrunk because the Celtics are experimenting with stress tests. How far can small lineups bend before they break? How much physical load can one true center absorb? How much energy can be outsourced to specialists instead of stars? These are not Garza questions. They are system questions. Look closer at the moments when Garza does play. He does not float. He does not drift. He collides with the game. Offensive rebounds that flip momentum. Screens that free shooters by inches, not feet. Quick decisions that prevent defenses from resetting. These actions do not scream for attention, but they quietly win possession. If Garza were truly expendable, Boston would already be shopping him aggressively. Instead, his situation sits in limbo, eligible to be moved, but not actively pushed out the door. That is not indifferent. That is optionality. Garza's contract is movable. His skill set is specific. His effort level is unquestioned. That combination is rare at the margins of a contender. Teams do not just trade players like that away without a clear return. They keep them as insurance, as leverage, as the kind of piece that quietly balances a deal when negotiations tighten.